Welcome, everyone. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. And thank you, Michael Weiser, for being here today as we continue to launch our series of experts via YouTube, via Skype, via Lisa Benson TV. And I want to thank you all for listening to this because Michael has been one of my most favorite analysts when it comes to the Middle East and national security, especially with regard to Israel. Welcome, Michael.
Hi, Lisa. Thank you for having me.
It's a great day. It's a very busy and vibrant news cycle. We barely are catching our breath when the next story is right on our doorstep to analyze. You, Michael Weiser, are an attorney and a foreign policy analyst and commentator. You have a brand new website right now called www.007attorney.com. What does that mean?
Right, that's my website for my business. I'm doing security clearances for federal and government contract employees. So if you know anybody, perhaps in the military or doing contract work for the federal government, go to www.007attorney.com if they have a security clearance problem, and I will do my best to help them out.
And we will direct them to you, and we thank you so much. And you have been in this national security sector for a long time. That's how I found you many years ago. You are a graduate student in international relations, and you always remind me of something. You and another colleague always say, Lisa, when you don't understand what one country is doing to another, you always say, remember mutual interests. And I want to thank you for that. That's helped me a great deal.
Yes, just one slight correction. I'm not a graduate student anymore. I graduated quite a while ago.
It was quite a while ago. Well, I thank you for being with me. Today we're going to talk about the first days, the less than a week of the Donald Trump administration and what it means to the Middle East, but what it really means to Israel. We, on social media, hear an awful lot going on about the United States Embassy in Tel Aviv being moved to Jerusalem. For those viewers, people who are watching this today, exactly why is not the United States Embassy in Jerusalem right now? Why is it in Tel Aviv? Why are there no embassies for any country in Jerusalem, the eternal capital of the Jewish people?
Well, for lack of a better explanation, it's basically that the Muslim and Arab world does not recognize Israel or really Jerusalem as the capital of the Jewish people. They believe it is the third holiest site in Islam, and that the Jews shouldn't have any part of it. It's part of the reason why that Muslims are permitted to pray on the Temple Mount and Jews are not. They're fighting tooth and nail to keep it away from the Jews of Israel, whatever way they can. And so Western countries are kind of cowed by the Muslim and Arab countries. And so instead of having their embassies and consulates in Jerusalem, they have them in Tel Aviv.
It's very interesting because it is the capital of the Jewish people. And again, any way to dilute us and make us less significant in the worldview. And that's a very important issue that we're discussing. One of the topics, one of the platforms for Donald Trump was to move the embassy, which is interesting because I'm hearing a lot about the new United States ambassador for Israel will actually not be working out of the Tel Aviv embassy, but he will be working out of the Jerusalem consulate in Arnona. And are you hearing that as well?
Yes, he has a house out there, and I hear he's going to be putting his American flag out there and working out there rather than from Tel Aviv. And I think that that's the initial stage, at least, for beginning the embassy from the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem.
And in your opinion, do you think the move to Jerusalem is a prolonged process, or will it happen right away? Will it happen in the imminent future, or are we going to hit this with the ground running with a sledgehammer? And what would be the issues involved to the world if the embassy was moved immediately to Jerusalem?
Well, I think we're already seeing it being played out. A lot of us thought that, or had heard that the embassy announcement would be made on Monday, saying that the embassy is moving to Jerusalem, and that's that. But that hasn't happened. In fact, there's been a lot of maneuvering around this to the effect of making it a slow transition and kind of keeping it under the radar. For example, you've had Sean Spicer, the spokesman for the president, saying that, it's just an initial move. It's very initial, preliminary. And so there's going to be no knee-jerk reaction on it. You have Rudy Giuliani being in Israel and meeting with Netanyahu and telling the Jerusalem Post that Trump supports the move of the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, but he also understands that the reality is complex. You have also the Arab side, where you have Mahmoud Abbas going to meet with King Abdullah in Jordan and formulating their response to a possible move of the embassy to Jerusalem, saying that it's a red line. Jordan has a special custodial relationship to the Temple Mount in the Islamic Trust, the Waqf there. He's got pressures at home from Syria, right above him, where the civil war is raging. He's got ISIS to his east. He's got Muslim Brotherhood people within his own country that threaten the stability of his kingdom. And so moving the embassy in a knee-jerk way to Jerusalem could potentially destabilize him, and also President Sisi in Egypt potentially, because we don't know how the Arab street would react to such a move, and I think these Arab leaders are nervous for what that could mean.
It's an excellent point. One of the topics in Israel, as you and I speak to Israelis all the time, every day, every other day, is that, and something that has not gotten a lot of traction in the United States because we have our own very vibrant news cycle these days, but Prime Minister Netanyahu is been investigated and potentially under indictment at any moment. Now, he will be in the United States in the next 10 days to visit with President Trump. What is this indictment exactly? Well, possible indictment, I should say. What did he do?
Right. There's no indictment yet. What has been going on for quite some time is an ongoing investigation of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on several issues. There's one issue about receiving gifts or possible bribes from close friends of his who happen to be multimillionaires and billionaires in the forms of cigars and champagne totaling over $100,000, if you can believe that. But that's only one of the minor issues. A bigger issue is the fact that that there's a tape supposedly showing possible quid pro quo with Netanyahu with one of his arch rivals in a newspaper, Yediot Achronot, with a man named Arnon Moses, which is more complex, and maybe as things develop, we'll learn more about it. But there is a very good article by Carolyn Glick, whom we interviewed several months back. And this article that she has is really about, centers on this Arnon Moses and how he went to go to the Knesset to go get a bill passed against Israel Hayom, which is another free publication in Israel that was cutting into Yediot's revenues. And essentially, he went to lobby to have a bill against Israel Hayom, and he brought it before Livni and Lieberman and I think about 40 other ministers, and yet there's no investigation against those ministers for influence peddling or any kind of bribery. The police aren't really looking into it, and that's the gist of the article. So the question is really whether this is a witch hunt against the prime minister or not.
That was the word that were coming out of my mouth. Does it look like a witch hunt against Prime Minister Netanyahu?
Well, the investigation is ongoing, and the thing is that the investigation has been ongoing for a while, and the police have been interviewing members of Netanyahu's family, associates, people like that, and they're often long interviews for hours on end. And this tells me one of two things. It's either that they're gathering evidence for a tremendous case against the prime minister, or they have no evidence and they're just fishing for anything. And we won't really know what's going to happen. I mean, certain publications say that an indictment is imminent. Even if an indictment comes, the wheels of justice turn slow. There are procedures to be done, and so it's not like making a cup of instant tea. It's going to take time for the indictment to wend its way through the legal system, and Netanyahu, by all measures and indications, is willing to fight it at the moment.
What does this mean to the U.S.-Israel relationship? I don't know if our listeners and our viewers understand what a coalition government is. It's a lot of different groups of people under one big tent, and the prime minister has to one day appeal to one side, one appeal to the other side. Everything always gets balanced out down the middle. I happen to like the coalition government model, but if he does get indicted, is it possible that his coalition government may collapse, and may there be a new election in Israel?
Well, anything's possible. I mean, we don't have enough information to know what would take place. But essentially, to give the viewers of this video an idea of how the Israeli government works, it's made up of coalitions. Unlike here, where you have one party, ruling with a majority, like Trump is the president. He's the president for 4 years, and really the only way he can be removed is if he commits a high crime or misdemeanor and is impeached and then convicted and then removed from office. However, in Israel, the prime minister, his government can be dissolved or fall apart if the coalition falls apart. And what parties need to do is cobble together enough parties to join a coalition so they have a majority in Israel's parliament, the Knesset. And the Knesset has 120 seats, so a majority is 61, where the government can actually rule and function. And so Netanyahu right now, he's a member of the Likud party and head of the Likud party, but he sits in the government with various other right-wing and religious parties that make up his coalition and give him a governing majority. So if an indictment were to come down, he might resign. He might be removed. Someone from the Likud might take his place. There could be elections. But really the issue is, even if Netanyahu is removed, and by all indications, Yair Lapid of the Yesh Atid party is in the lead to be prime minister, even he couldn't rule with his party alone, because it's projected that his party would only have 27 seats as opposed to the 61 he would need, which means he would need to build a coalition of parties willing to join his government, and that's not so easy. So either way, it's uncertain who's going to be the prime minister, assuming an indictment comes down.
This is very interesting development for Israel, particularly now that we have a President Trump who has a good relationship with Prime Minister Netanyahu. I don't think America fully understands what is happening. Interesting that you should call it a witch hunt. I don't know what to call it. I really don't. I know that there is an investigation, but you and I and others on Lisa Benson Radio have covered the evidence that President Obama and the left in the United States was very much involved with thwarting the re-election of Prime Minister Netanyahu. So I would imagine, as there's so much talk these days about other countries being involved in the political process of one country or another, that once again the left movement globally would like to see Prime Minister Netanyahu just extinguished from the scene. Do you agree with that?
Well, I think that the left, I mean, you don't need to really go to outside influence from other countries. I mean, it did happen with the United States under Obama meddling in the election, but there's enough of a left-wing movement in Israel that wants to see Netanyahu gone. They don't need any outside help. The question is this really a witch hunt or is it not? Don't forget There's also the issue, another scandal more recently where it was suggested that one of Netanyahu's closest confidants, his personal private lawyer, who happens also to be a relative of his, had financially benefited from Israel's purchase of submarines and submarine missile boats from Germany. So there's many investigations ongoing. The question is, which ones are real, which ones are fake, what's going to stick, if anything. And quite frankly, at this point, nobody knows.
It's an interesting dynamic in a country the size of New Jersey, with almost 8 million people being Jews and almost 1.2 or 1.5 million being Arab Israelis. Explain to me, my question is, and I know that people on social media ask me this all the time. You know that Arab Israelis and Jews live nearly side by side with each other. It's not difficult to be in Jerusalem hailing a cab and you get into a cab and it is an Arab Israeli. As that happens to you, it's happened to me many times. Has it happened to you?
Well, I think Israeli Jews and Israeli Arabs live among each other, and even in Judea and Samaria, you have Arabs and Jews mixing. It's inevitable, given the proximity of the two populations, and it's just a fact of life.
It's so interesting, but Judea Samaria, as we call it, is often called in the media the West Bank. And you and I have been to Judea Samaria. We know Area A, Area B, and Area C. Now, the Palestinian area, which is Area A, I believe, has, I think, 2 million Palestinians and big red signs. And I've taken pictures of myself in front of, this is part of the Oslo Accords, no Israelis can enter. But if you go into Madel Adomin, or if you go into Efrat, or you have a cup of coffee or lunch in one of the in Area B or C, Palestinians and Israelis in the quote unquote settlements are having lunch together. I found that is something that I found absolutely astonishing in my last trip when I was there. That you can have women coming in, Arab women in burqas. They're Palestinian. They're not Israeli citizens. They're Palestinians. They're under the Palestinian Authority, and yet you're mingling with them. You're in a bread shop. You're having coffee with them, and everybody is living side by side. The media does not portray Judea Samaria like that. Is there a comment you'd like to make on that?
Yeah, actually, in dealing with Judea and Samaria, a big issue that was brought up recently was the United Nations Resolution 2334 dealing with settlements in Judea and Samaria. And I think it's important for people to know that there really has been a sea change in the past few days. Every time the Obama administration talked about settlements, it was something negative.
Yes.
And in contrast, in the phone call that took place between Trump and Netanyahu on Sunday, settlements weren't really mentioned. There was no mention of them. It was silence, even though that same weekend, just hours apart from the phone call, Netanyahu approved several hundred homes being built in East Jerusalem and homes being built in the settlement blocks to the tune of about 2,500 in the existing settlement blocks, and really nary a word was said by the Trump administration, which really shows the length that the Trump administration is going to build better relations with Israel. The invitation by Donald Trump to Netanyahu to come visit in February. And basically what Netanyahu did when talking to his cabinet was make a deal. You mentioned Ma'ale Adumim, which is on the eastern side of Jerusalem, and essentially if annexed, would enclose Jerusalem into Israel. Basically what Netanyahu said, there was a bill on the table by Education Minister Naftali Bennett from the Jewish Home Party, and that bill to annex Ma'ale Adumim was shelved in exchange for Netanyahu allowing the building to go forward of these settlement units, because Netanyahu does not want to shake up or surprise Donald Trump or the new administration with any sudden moves. I think this whole scenario is a big indicator that there's a positive shift towards Israel, but also that Netanyahu and the Trump administration mentioned this as well, as cooperating together more, as moving together forward in a joint fashion, in a coordinated fashion. So Netanyahu emphasized that he wanted no sudden surprises, that he's going to Washington, and that him and Trump are going to hammer out a program for moving forward, not only in Israel but in the Middle East.
You know, we talk about Ma'ale Adumim, like everybody knows what we're talking about. To us, it's such a spectacular place because you have Jerusalem, and then after you have East Jerusalem that we regained control of after the 1967 war. And that is beyond that was once this area that Ma'ale Adumim and Judea Samaria once belonged to the Jordanians. This is all part of what happened in Resolution 2334, is them suggesting that we give back everything that we gained as a result of the 1960s, the Six-Day War, which is a whole other topic that you and I can go on for about an hour on. But Ma'ale Adumim is not going anywhere. What do you think will happen? So the annexation of Ma'ale Adumim is what you're saying will not happen? They're not going to talk about annexation right now?
They're not going to talk about the annexation until the Trump-Netanyahu meeting takes place first.
I see.
They don't want to prejudice that meeting. What's going to happen is Netanyahu is going to go to Washington and discuss the settlements with Trump there.
I hate that.
And then we'll see what happens with Ma'ale Adumim and settlements and moving forward. But it's interesting that Netanyahu told essentially his cabinet that in building those 2,500 units and the 500 plus units in East Jerusalem, he said, this is just a taste of what's to come. So it just shows you really how strong the relations and what a sea change it is for relations between America and Israel. And it's interesting to note also the background of these two men, Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu. Before becoming the president, of course, everybody knows that Donald Trump was a builder and a real estate mogul and a businessman. And it's interesting to note that when he was at MIT, Benjamin Netanyahu earned degrees in business and architecture.
Well, fascinating.
So they do have a common language. I don't know how Trump views the building of settlements, but it seems kind of interesting that they're both in a way businessmen and real estate men.
Well, it is a move in a positive direction for the Jewish people and the Jewish state of Israel. I am cautious, as you are, to not go in with any sledgehammer approach. We don't want our family and friends in Jerusalem or in Israel to be impacted by violence anymore. We'd like some peace and quiet for a while. But we know that, as you pointed out, they are living with Hezbollah to the north. ISIS is now within Israel proper. We have seen that. We've got Muslim Brotherhood this way. We've got the Jordanians that way. They are surrounded by people that want to annihilate them. And every day is a survival issue for the state of Israel. And so anyway, Iran too. I mean, by the way, I don't know if you saw the post that I put. There was Iranians have been caught having nuclear missile components travel from the Ukraine on Iranian aircraft right into Iran. So the time for Iran, do you feel, everybody's speculating, but it won't be long that both Iran and North Korea, with the help of Russia, and China, will have everything they need to be nuclear, totally nuclear ballistic. Do you agree with that?
Well, I think that's Iran's ultimate goal, is to be able to be independent from a nuclear standpoint, complete with ICBMs and warheads mounted on them to boot. Netanyahu still mentioned this weekend that Iran was a major threat. I think that he and Donald Trump see eye to eye on Iran as far as it being a bad deal. but we're not sure what Trump is going to do yet, if he's going to revise the deal, if he's going to tear it up. We're unsure what he's going to do about it, but I'm sure it will be discussed at length when Netanyahu certainly comes to Washington, and then we'll see what happens. But it's interesting to note also, on Saturday night, Netanyahu recorded a video message that was posted all over social media in an address to the Iranian people. And he emphasized that the Iranian people are not the enemy, and that basically the Iranian regime, is the one that's dangerous. So I find the timing rather interesting, right before he talks to Donald Trump, and to me, what this signals is, rather than perhaps an immediate military confrontation, maybe he's ready to work with America and with Donald Trump, perhaps to effect regime change in Iran, rather than move forward with a military option immediately, as the circumstances may be. This is just speculation on my part, of course, but it's interesting. It makes one speculate why he would record such a video message if not for that person, to show the Iranian people that, the West, Israel, and America by extension is behind them, and that maybe it's time, if people are brave enough, to effect a regime change in Iran.
I am struck by something I read today also. In the Talmud, we Jews know that we read Talmud, and it says if you save one life, you save the world. And I try to live my life that way in all the humanitarian work I do. But there's a lot being said of whether Israel would take any of the Sunni Muslims impacted by the civil war in Syria. I read today that Israel will actually be taking in 100 orphans, Sunni Muslim orphans. Again, it's just who they are as a people. It's the dream, it's the reality, it's Talmud, and then there's always the nightmare. But for people who have not been to Israel, you have no idea how magnificent Tel Aviv is. I mean, you and I know. I mean, it's high technology. It's a startup nation. It's an incredible place. It's like Paris and Morocco in Tel Aviv. It's just gorgeous. I have another question for you. It has to do, again, we talked about annexing, but President Trump will be stopping funding to those entities that are supporting the Palestinian Authority and the PLO. What can you tell us about that, Michael?
Well, Trump is doing a lot of work, and it hasn't even been a week yet that he's been in office. But he's certainly doing a lot, issuing a lot of executive orders. But the thing about Trump, for all his unpredictability, that people claim he's unpredictable, that we don't know what he's going to do, that he's unstable. For all of that, he really has been sticking to what he promised on the campaign trail. He's working on getting the wall up between the United States and Mexico. He is working on excluding visas for countries that support or harbor terrorists, such as Syria, Yemen, Iraq, Iran, and on and on. But most recently, with regard to the UN, he said that there was going to be a change of direction after January 20th, that things were going to look different, and it seems that he's implementing that. What he's doing is he's issuing executive orders that would essentially drastically cut U.S. funding to the UN and any organization that sponsors terrorism. And the orders also state that the U.S. Will cut all funding to any organization that grants full membership to the Palestinian Authority, or PLO. And in addition to that, he's also issuing orders and calls for carrying out at least a 40% overall reduction in any remaining United States funding toward international organizations. And the order says that this review applies only to multilateral treaties that are not directly related to national security, extradition, or international trade. And essentially what he's doing is he's basically cutting funding to these, far left or anti-Israel organizations in the UN and beyond. and he's making exceptions for national security, for extradition, and for international trade that would aid America's economy. And so, really, he's being the president that he campaigned on, keeping America safe, strong national security, while also getting America back to work and improving the economy.
I know you feel that way, and we all do hope so. One other last point before we conclude this interview, because we did talk about the United Nations Resolution 2334. We've all talked about it. I've written about it a lot. And December 28th, John Kerry said the following. After the resolution, he came up and he gave his farewell, goodbye, or whatever. He was talking about the resolution, and he said, Israel, regarding Israel, it can be Jewish or it can be democratic. It cannot be both. And we all looked at that, and Kerry demonstrated his limited understanding of how Israel is governed and how it remains both Jewish and democratic. Do you have a comment on that?
Well, I believe when discussing these kind of issues, you have to tell the truth first, the facts, and then you can give your own biases and opinions. I think when Kerry says that, that's rather overbroad and maybe a simplification. You know, we had an interview with Carolyn Glick, and she presented the one-state solution, and I think there were merits on both sides as far as keeping Israel Jewish and can we keep it democratic with the absorption of 1.5 million or 2 million Arabs, granting them citizenship to the Arabs who live in Judea and Samaria. And that is an argument that is proper and appropriate to have. But what Netanyahu's doing is something different. He's saying, well, he made a statement that the Palestinians, he was willing to give them a state minus. And what does this mean? It means that Israel will retain the major settlement blocks. They'll retain a presence in the Jordan Valley for security purposes. And perhaps the Palestinians will have areas of self-government, which, incidentally, Naftali Bennett is more in favor of. The Palestinians say, no, you're not going to do that because that's going to, truncate any territory we want a full state with all rights accorded to a state. But, they haven't moved towards that. They haven't come to the negotiating table. They're still spouting out incitement to destroy Israel, not to have a state. So nobody knows the final shape of what it's going to be like. So for Kerry to make just such a blanket statement, I think really oversimplifies the complexities of the conflict. And now that we have a new administration, I think the contours of what a Palestinian state may look like may shift again now that things have moved considerably in Israel's favor.
Yes, and Resolution 242 in 1948, if I understand this correctly, clearly stated that after the war, that those defensible positions Israelis did not need to leave if they were defensible positions for them. We can look into that further. We can have just a session just on that. I want to thank you, Michael. Is there anything else that you would like to say? Because we could go on and talk forever. Those who haven't been to Israel, it's shocking to understand. I have one thing that I have been trying to say, and I want you to comment on it, and that'll be our final thing. I don't like it when the outside world tries to divide us, the Jewish people in Israel or in the diaspora, between left, moderate, and liberal. We're only 20 million people worldwide. We could be obliterated in a couple of hours. I mean, seriously. And I want to do all we can to glue us together as a people, as 20 million people. I often say that the left in Israel, the right in Israel, and those independent, middle-of-the-road Israelis are Zionists nonetheless. And we have to remember that there isn't anybody living in Israel today, whether left, middle, or right, that wants to destroy the state of Israel. How would you debate that with me, or would you not debate that with me?
Well, look, I think everybody, you know the old saying, two Jews, three opinions. You know, that's why I think Israeli politics are so fractious. You have literally, it seems, a new party sprouting up every day because everybody thinks he's right. Everybody wants to be prime minister. So, you know, everybody thinks they know what's best for the country. You know, I have a friend living in Israel, and she thinks that Netanyahu is terrible and that instead of allocating money to the settlements, the money should be better spent on social programs and the elderly and Holocaust survivors who don't have enough to pay their rent, and you know, people with AIDS and social services and things of that nature. I don't think that makes her any less patriotic. You know, other people might think that, you know, security is paramount, and so they want a right-wing government, or people think that too much is spent on defense and they think that calculated risks have to be taken and that the hard line against the Palestinians is not working, it's encouraging terrorism. I don't think it necessarily makes someone more or less patriotic. I think, you know, in my view, it might make their outlook wrong. I think that they're wrong. But I don't want to go down that path necessarily of questioning someone's patriotism. I think it's largely counterproductive. I think you can point out what you think people are doing wrong and give arguments. I always like to say that I love the word because it forces you to give a reason for what you're saying, and I think that that reasoned debate is the lifeblood of any democracy.
I think that this is a very good place to conclude this interview, unless you have anything else to add. And you're just exquisite in your delivery of these issues, Michael. And I so appreciate you're also a board member with us.
Yes, indeed.
I'm lucky for that. Because
So
I'm very, very grateful to have you not only as a friend, but someone to talk to about these issues and to help me to explain it to the American people. So you are a board member with the Queen Esther Project and Lisa Benson TV and radio, and we will continue shedding light on the truth of these situations. And I would be remiss not to say that if you're watching this video today and you've enjoyed it, please go to thequeenestherproject.org and make your charitable donation to this. And we're going to Richmond to do a film. We're helping the Yazidis and to stop and to at least bring some awareness to their continued suffering. I hope to be in Iraq this year. Did you know that, Michael?
I heard rumblings of you being in Iraq. I can't wait to see what footage you bring back, but please be safe.
Yes, we won't tell you when I go. We won't tell the world when I'm going, but Israel and Iraq are definitely on the agenda to take an assessment of the Yazidi situation and to do all we can to get the Yazidis and Christians who have been persecuted by ISIS out. There will be a moratorium on this, and we just want to get those who have been waiting a long time into the United States if that's where they want to come. Anyway, Michael, it's a great honor. www.wo7attorney.com, and my great friend, and I thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, Lisa.
God bless.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.